I started out life as a photographer, then I got caught up with horses, race horses, and I became a farmer. So I always called myself then a farmer with a camera. They start in about 1975, which is when we came to live in Ireland for the first time, intending to stay for a year, and we stayed for 45. So that's how it worked. The very earliest one would be of my wife in Cashel. My friend Denny Cordell, his son Barney, found the Cranberries, and so they signed her, them, should I say. She's very young and only just recently signed, so you can see Dolores herself is rather guarded and on her mettle there, you know, not quite sure what's going on. This is my daughter Poppy, with a cabbage on her head, just messing around in the kitchen at home. You know, these pictures are really, loosely speaking, they're an autobiography in monochrome. Here's Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards, and there's Charlie Watts in the background, just gassing away. Ronnie bought a house out in Kildare, and he was interested in horses, and because of my day job in horses, I gave him some advice and some help with his horses, and we became pals and hung out a lot. In those days, the Stones were in two camps. There was sort of mixed side, and then you got the sort of Keith and Ronnie side. And so I was always there at night with Ronnie and Keith, and Mick would arrive in the day when I wasn't there, and Mick was much more standoffish, whereas the other lads were very pally. This is John Hurt. It was a summer afternoon driving back from Maynooth to Leixlip, and it was suddenly a beautiful light. And John was in the front. I said, "Oh, John, do turn around, I'll take your picture." And so he did, and this one. And then there was Marianne was beside me, so I took this one of her. So it's just a spur of the moment thing, you know. Marianne was always a friend of ours. And here, this was, again, obviously the recording studio, and Keith and Marianne hadn't seen each other for many, many years. So it was nice to see them. Jerry Lee Lewis, he came to Dublin because the American taxman had stripped his house of everything. Every single thing except the kids' pony. And the only reason they didn't take that was they had an illness called laminitis, which gave it a sore foot, and it was lame. So they were frightened to take a lame horse. Otherwise, he was cleaned out. And he came to Dublin, and I thought this was such an extraordinary story that this great hero, this great originator of rock and roll, was living in Booterstown, you know, in a little red brick terrace, as normal as you like, taking his son to school every day. And at the same time, he's also a friend of Ronnie's, so I went along to these gigs at the Gaiety Theatre in Dublin. Jerry Lee, my experience, was always a very refined southern gentleman, softly spoken, nothing wild about him. He certainly wasn't swinging back drinks or pills or anything, just very mannerly, nice man. And given his wild, wild reputation, it was startling, you know, to find him so mannerly that he would grasp me by the thigh if we were talking about something, say, "Hey, how about that, killer?" So being addressed as killer by the killer was startling. No, they were taken where I lived when I was a kid, down in the south of England. And Nick was a friend of ours, and he was always playing guitar, and one realised he wanted to build a career, but he hadn't actually made records at that stage. This is an old rug that my parents, in 1946, had gone on their honeymoon to Spain, just after the war, and they bought this rug in Spain, and we had it at home. It was often used for picnics. And when I took these pictures in 1968, it was the height of the sort of psychedelic explosion, and bright colours were everywhere. So we thought, I know what we'll do. We'll get the old picnic rug and wrap it round Nick and take some pictures. And it just seemed like a natural thing to do at that time. The thing about Nick is he became ill very early in his career. He got a mental illness which led to him withdrawing from life to a great extent and ultimately dying very, very young. So the number of pictures of him extant is very limited.
What kind of company was he?
The best of company. Very, very nice jolly, you know, a good pal. And it was 25 years after they were taken before anybody ever showed any interest in these pictures. And they became used on a CD cover by Island Records. These pictures were taken without any plan at all. I would have taken them, processed them, and could have left them in a drawer for many years. I rather like old negatives left on their own. They have a life of their own then. If you look at a negative or photograph very soon after you've taken it, it's just a pale imitation of your memory. Whereas if you leave it to sit for a few years, it matures and it builds a life of its own. And when you see it again, when you address it again, it has a whole different presence.